Hello and welcome once again to episode 140 of Code Completion. We're a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri, and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So once again, we have some Swift evolution updates, and this one both comes out of left field and also makes me wonder how on earth we did not have this yet. But
Yeah, for
the
real.
package manager is finally getting mixed language target support, which
Yes.
means that you no longer need to have a target for Swift and a target for Objective C. You can now have a single target and have sources in both. Now, you can't do that yet, of course. You need to wait for this proposal to go through the evolution process and get merged into Swift, maybe 5.9, maybe 5.10. And I always found that weird with versioning.
Yeah.
Like it makes total sense that it's like separate numbers, but it's like once you hit double digits on one of them, it's like wait a second,
This is
we've
weird.
taken this too far.
Yeah.
um, but anyways, back to the main topic. Yeah, it's high time that this got added, likely because of C++ integration
hmm
finally becoming serious. This becomes feasible, right? Up until now, it wasn't really feasible, and therefore, the best solution was to keep things separate. And now that the integration is feasible, it's high time that these two things become one. So excited to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's already an implementation. So, assuming everything else with this proposal goes well, it could be, potentially merged in pretty quick. And like Dimitri said, come out in maybe the next version of Swift. So that's cool. Super exciting. That's kind of weird that we call it the Swift package manager, but once once you can do all of this, but uh, yeah.
I mean, it's still the package format itself is still in Swift, and I know
Mm,
some of the initial designers of Swift were not sure if that was the right move after like it actually came into use, because it brings up some very subtle problems like needing to parse the package .swift file in a sandbox to make sure it doesn't do anything
right.
super jank in the process. So there's that. But until then, I think it's a completely fine solution for what
Yeah.
it's doing. In completely separate news, the social network sagas continue, and I personally am kind of getting a little burnt out by all the social media like news that's going on. So we're gonna make this a quick one.
Yeah.
And I have one, two, three, four, 5.5 bullet items for this. The first one is Threads is blocked in the EU because, of course, Threads is blocked in the EU. It never got released in the EU, the European Union, and as of this recording, they outright blocked European access to Threads, even via VPNs, which was quite surprising. Like they don't want any European uh, citizens to use Threads, and this is the point where I say, "Gotcha, Threads," because I am part European
Haha.
citizen living in the United States, and I'm protected by those laws, and I'm still not going to use Threads. So
Yeah.
that I guess they're safe there. Next
Double
time,
safe.
next time. But yeah, so that's the thing. Meanwhile, Macedon is getting initial buy-in from governments, and this is super exciting. Because this is like I don't know why they were on Twitter. Why is government on Twitter? That's weird, but it became
Yeah.
the public speaking place. This is a much better solution where governments can all have their own little Mastodon server, and they can control it. And if authoritarian government decides to join Macedon, the rest of the world can either let them join in or they can just block them and move on.
Yeah.
So like I don't see any harm from this at all. So great thumbs up for me for this one.
Yep, definitely. In less thumbs uppy news, Twitter is paying for far right influencers to sort of influence, and they're getting revenue from it. Yeah, kind of an interesting article from the Washington Post. Pro tip: you probably already knew this, but if you I clicked the link that we are going to have in the description for to link to the Washington Post, and it paywalls you, or it says, "Here, give me your email address and you can read it for free." Just turn on reader mode, and then you can read the whole thing for free without giving your email address. Um, but yeah, it basically talks about Twitter is kind of handpicking these far right influencers with
The
like
cream of the
a mil.
crop, as some
Uh,
might say.
well, it's yeah. Uh, with like a million followers or whatever, and they're paying him like 10,000. It was like suspiciously like the person had like 1,040,000 followers, and they got paid 10,000 40 or $400 or something. It was like a very easy kind of number to kind of glean from like the amount of followers that they had. I don't know if that was coincidence or not, but anyway, it's basically just far right influencers that they're paying. So as opposed to something like my first thought was like YouTube, where um, assuming you follow all their terms and conditions for monetization, politically you can be on whatever side and you can still make money. So it's there in that sense where this is very much like a handpicked thing of hey, these people aren't really liking Twitter right now, but they're still here, so let's maybe give them some money to help our case. Kind of weird.
Yeah, kind of weird. Meanwhile, in the Apple blogosphere, John Gruber has a pretty bad take. And generally, he has some pretty good insight on things, but he went ahead and said that Threads is the most fun, most interesting new product of the year. And no one in the EU can use it or will be able to use it anytime soon because their own elected officials passed the law that effectively bans it. Nice job. Have fun over here in the library. um and it's like a giant moment when
Yeah.
I read that, and it seems like the rest of the community likely thought the same and is not jiving with this thought,
Yeah.
namely because on several assets facets, right? The EU, number one, is not passing laws to make it difficult for these companies like Meta specifically to operate, just to make it difficult for them to operate. They're passing those laws to protect like privacy and basic human rights and stuff like that. And Meta does not care about privacy and basic human rights. And if you have any doubt that they are getting better, or improving, or the same old Facebook, like very recently they're in the news of buying tax information of private. It's like what?
It's so
So
bad.
yeah,
Everything is just so bad with them, dude.
so
And they don't care.
they don't care at all. So needless to say, I don't think Threads is the best new thing since sliced bread, and a lot of people don't agree. And if that means that us tech people are going to be kind of relegated to Mastodon and not
Yeah.
be opened up to the rest of the world, I'd say that's fine. That's
That's
when I
fine.
enjoyed using Twitter the most, was in that period of time when normal people did not use Twitter, and I got to just follow the tech stuff that I like to follow. That was like the best time. And then when everyone else joined Twitter, then it became like I got to read all these tweets, and I'm not keeping up, and this is bad for my mental health. So I'd say this is a win-win, honestly, over here in the library. Um,
In the library. Oh man.
it's like that was probably the worst the worst kind of insult. Is like you're telling a whole bunch of people who very much enjoy being here
Reading.
that it's like horrible to be here. And it's
Yeah.
mm,
It's
okay.
yeah.
Like you do you.
Yep.
um but in our last point, Twitter is changing their terms of service to mean that anything you post there, they can go ahead and use to train AI models. And this no longer means, oh, we're going to train AI models so that way they can do something with that information. It means they can train AI models to generate data based on what you provide. So, kind of like GitHub, where any source code you provide, whether the license agrees with it or not, is now subject to being auto completed on other people's projects, which is iffy at best, but it is an open source kind of thing. For
Mhm.
Twitter, if you're sharing your artwork, you're not expecting Twitter to be able to generate new artwork based off of that. You are expecting to promote yourself and share your artwork. So not the art, not the copyright to the art itself. So needless to say, I'm not super jazzy about that. But
Yeah.
I'm not super jazzy about anything Twitter's doing nowadays, anyways. So whatever. Um,
Yeah. All of this stuff is just making me, I mean, not that I share art on Twitter, but I know that a lot of people do and did. Maybe not so much now. Um, but yeah, it's just like it makes me regret less and less every day the decision to move to Mastodon because it's like this stuff doesn't happen and it's probably never going to happen.
I think the best thing about moving to Mastodon is when you do every now and then want to click on a hot hashtag to see like what's going on. You don't have a an ad every 3 tweets, and b under right underneath that ad some nude porn
Yep,
that is just
that's
like
also
accompanying
true.
it for Nintendo Switch news or Pikmin. It's like, why are there people dressed as Pikmin uh, having sex? It's not
Yeah,
something that I
yeah,
wanted to particularly plant in my brain at that moment in time. But that's what
yeah,
Twitter wanted to plant in my brain, and they're totally fine with that. So I am so happy that Mastodon has uh, a better BS detector than whatever is going on Twitter, because
which
they don't
is
have to
like,
serve ads. They don't have to like drive engagement. That less engagement is good for Mastodon. It's cheaper server costs. So like I don't know, it's very very bizarre.
yeah. Speaking of kind of in a similar vein, Hollywood studios want actors replicas for free forever.
Yeah, it's like
And
another spin on this. AI is great. Take that the world is kind of pushing at the moment. Yeah, AI is great for giant corporations. That's about it.
yeah,
Not even
yeah,
rich people get a benefit from AI. It turns out, because yeah, it's like, oh yeah, you record a movie with us. We're just gonna recreate you whenever we want, and
for
you
free.
no longer have rights to you, which I think is like a giant red flag if
Oh yeah,
we are not electing officials to pass laws to protect us from these basic human rights. Um,
yeah.
that's
It's
that's that.
everyone's so behind. I mean, this is so new and like we're following it, but like no one else is. No one else cares about this and is looking towards the future.
Hmm.
Um, in this article, there's an image and whatever the description of the image isn't really a description, but it says the proposal will sound familiar to Black Mirror fans. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. Black Mirror's been around for a while, and they've kind of uh, it's weird that stuff that sounds like it could be from Black Mirror is like actually happening not that long after. I don't
Well,
know.
I think it comes down to you had a whole bunch of people who watched Black Mirror and were taking it as a warning of this is the path, this is 1984, this is what could happen, right? And then you
Yeah,
have a bunch of people watching Black Mirror saying, "Cool, I want that."
that's a
Um,
good idea.
yeah, and they happen to have a lot of money and able to make it happen. So
Yeah,
that's where we're at, and nothing is impossible nowadays with technology and the advancements that we're making. Um, but at a certain point, like we are kind of forgetting what makes it fun to be humans on this planet that's not going to last very much longer. And we're just kind of serving the richest, which is okay, I guess. But like back to the medieval times we go, I guess.
yeah, for real though. That's very true.
Uh, okay. Done with the social network sagas. I guess we'll have updates next week because they never end.
Of course we
Um,
will.
but something else that never ends is new beta releases, and iPad OS 17 came out, of course. And Spencer, I hear that you succumbed to peer pressure and installed it. Peer pressure being the developer release news RSS that said the beta
Yeah,
is available.
yeah, exactly. Yes, I now have two iPads, so I was like, I'll sacrifice an iPad to check it out because I can use my other one if it totally sucks. So I installed, I think it was beta two on my iPad Air, and just started playing around with it. It's pretty fun. I think it's got some good additions. I pulled up the preview page from Apple, and unfortunately, there's stuff that I can't test, like Stage Manager, because my iPad Air it has like an A14. It doesn't have an M1, so I can't.
So pedestrian.
I know I such a pleb here. But some things that I did really like are the lock screen widgets. You can kind of only put them on the left side of the lock screen, which I think is fine. You can put quite a few widgets on there, in kind of the very small, like 1 by 1 squares, the 2 by 1 or the 2 by 2 squares. And it looks really good. I had an issue with it. You trying to move things around, move the widgets around in that list, and it would they would just disappear. So right before this episode, I installed beta 3. I was like, oh, maybe it'll fix it. It made it worse. I dragged things over to that list, and they'd be there for about half a second and then just disappear. So
It's still
I
a
mean,
beta.
it's a developer beta. It's buggy, but it's cool, and the new planetary backgrounds are super fun. They look really nice. I'm sure they'd look amazing on like an OLED screen, or whatever, the Retina Liquid, whatever it's called on the iPad Pro. A little more contrast, but no Pluto, which is a bummer. We were all
Ah,
speculating, and I know no Pluto, so
so
that's
Pluto
a bummer.
Killer on Twitter will be very pleased. If you don't know, that's the astrologist that uh, basically brought to the table that we should not consider Pluto a planet anymore, because there are like 17 other objects that are bigger or near the size of Pluto, all in the vicinity that we just happened to not discover when we discovered Pluto.
Right?
But now that we know that they exist, it's like there's a lot of reasons to not count this as a planet. It's a planetoid. It's planet-like. But either we count all of those as planets, and then we have a
Yeah.
long list of 100 objects to think about, or we just consider the 8 main ones to be significantly larger, or significantly more interesting to talk about, and then all the Kuiper Belt objects, which are separate. Um, the irony is that this person, whom I'm forgetting their name, I'll pull that up quickly afterwards, but they posit that there is likely a ninth proper planet that is significantly
Mm.
larger in size, which is dubbed Planet X, because there is like some anomaly in the gravitational pull of all the Kuiper Belt objects. The fact that Pluto is like off skew, for instance. Um, so it's just a matter of where on Earth is this thing, or where in the solar system is this thing,
Yeah.
because it ain't on Earth. Um, and it is so far, like the projected place where it is so far, the light of the sun would not illuminate it unless you were
Oh
looking
wow.
straight at it and like overexposed. So it's not going to be an easy find. And it's in a portion of the sky that has like a significant amount of surface area to search. So it's just a matter of time of us searching. Is it here? Nope. Is it here? Nope. Is it here? Nope. And eventually, is it here? Yeah. And if we get to that point, then it's confirmed that we have a proper ninth planet that is significantly farther, but still technically in our solar system. And it does make some close approaches over like a 10,000 year period. We're just in the unlucky part of the 10,000 year
Mm.
period where we're not able to observe it. So that's where that is. But that's the reason why there's no Pluto. But we have some gorgeous pictures of Pluto, so that's kind of a shame that we don't have like proper
Yeah.
wallpapers for it. But at the same time, like it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Um, Another
Mike
thing that I
Brown,
played around with,
sorry,
Mike Brown.
Mike
No,
Brown
you're good.
is the astrologist, uh, astronomer.
Yeah, I think it's astrologist.
Okay. It's always tough because the other word is astrology. It's not astrologist then. Astrolo-
Oh yeah, good point.
Astrology is the
I
bad one. Astronomy is the good one. So
That's the
astronomer.
bad one.
It's
That's awesome.
yeah. Anyways, please continue.
Yeah.
I regret
So
my mistakes.
no, you're good. Yeah, so like going through this list of things in the preview, like I really didn't get to a ton of them, but another one that I did check out was the health app. Looks really good. I kind of am sporadic in my wearing of my Apple Watch, and so it doesn't have a ton of information there. But there was a period of a year or two that I did wear it almost daily when I was like actually going into an office to work or to teach. And I went back to that, and it looks really good. I mean, it's the same health app; it's just in a bigger display, and it looks nice being able to see a little more information at once. So that's cool. Didn't play around with like the direct PDF editing or the Safari profiles or anything like that, but I'm excited overall. For what I've done, it seems like an incremental upgrade, but the things that it's promising for the most part seem really cool. Um, what was the feature that's not out yet? Like the airdrop and be able to just like walk away and have it continue. Can't test that because it doesn't come out until later. Um, but yeah, overall, it looks good and visually it's very similar, but it's got some good improvements. So if you like planets, you'll get some sweet wallpapers, and the lock screen widgets are nice too. So not very in depth and all inclusive, but it'll be good.
You mentioned the health app on the iPad, and I think that's a great addition, mostly because folks that don't yet have an iPhone can start tracking and building up like a health history that they can go ahead and rely on. One of the
Yeah,
coolest things that eventually ended up in my own health history is the fact that I got or previous to having any sort of Wi-Fi scale. I had WaitBot, which was made by the same people who make Ivory and Tapbots
nice.
in general. This is like one of their first apps, WaitBot, and it lets you just step on a scale and then record your weight, right? And
Mm.
eventually they added support for the Withings Smart Scale. I don't remember if it was called Withings back then. They changed their name so many times as they got bought by Nokia, rebought them from Nokia. It's a thing. Anyways, they had support for that scale, which meant that if you stepped on the scale, it would automatically show up in WaitBot the next time you launched it.
Mm.
And also, it meant that anything you recorded in WaitBot would sync back to Withings, which meant that I have history since like 2007,
Oh, dang.
like
That's
almost
cool.
daily weight history from that time. Because eventually Withings added support for Apple Health and synced all of that into it.
Right.
So it's really cool seeing my weight just like take go to unhealthy proportions and then
I
stay
know,
there.
dude.
So
Oh,
it's finally making a return now that I'm sleep deprived in other ways. But that's neither here nor there. So what I wanted to say is I started tracking the weight of my daughter, and I'm using an old iPhone to keep track of it in the health app under an iCloud account for her. And she can choose to keep this or delete it once she's
sure.
old enough. But at the very least, she'll be able to look back when she's also 30 and be like, I used to weigh 5 pounds. Which,
What a world we live in that
uh,
you can do that. That's
an
awesome.
unattainable goal by any adult standard, but it's needless to say a thing to make you think and think back on. So I would have loved to be able to just look at that once or 5 times in my life and just ponder.
Yeah.
So my daughter will be able to do that. And any of your daughters or sons or children in general may be able to do that. If you don't have an extra iPhone and you just want to get an iPad Mini, you can go ahead and start tracking that on that device. So that's super cool.
Yeah, that's way cool. I'm very interested to get a an Apple Health scale now.
Yeah, if you want to, I highly recommend the Withings like Smart Body Analyzer 217, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
The basically you change the AAA batteries once every few months. I just have a spare set charging right next to it,
Hmm.
so it's never too much of a bother. And if you are by yourself, it's super easy. You just walk on it. If you're by yourself with a cat, eventually the cat will sit on it and get wings in, but it won't mix them up with you. It'll be like this looks separate. Um,
Mm. That's awesome.
and if you have multiple people in the household that are of similar weight, it will let you pick by like balancing on the left or right side to
Oh,
choose
cool.
who you are. So that way you can discern between them. So overall, A plus from me if you want to like consider that specific model works great.
Cool.
Talking about things that work great, iCloud Keychain is going to support Chrome and Edge soon, which will hypothetically work great in Sonoma once we get to that point. The coolest part about this is anything that supports Chrome extensions like Brave or Arc,
Right.
any Chromium browser, will be able to make use of this. So if you primarily use Safari for your general browsing needs, but need to use a Chromium browser to say record a podcast, um, then that is something that will hopefully make you happy as you can now access your passwords through that Chromium browser and not need to have them in three different places. Currently, I have a few passwords saved in Chrome just because whenever I need to use Chrome and I need to use those passwords, they're saved in there. But if I
Yeah.
ever need to change those passwords, then it's like changing them in three places, and it's kind of annoying. So, um, looking forward to this for those sparse use cases, so that way I don't need to kind of worry about that.
Yep, definitely. It's it's always been a pain. Like when I get signed out of, Google I think it's happened a couple times in Riverside, which is what we use to record. Jumping into Keychain and searching for it, and I have 1,000 entries for my Google account, so figuring out which one's the right one. It's just like it's a whole thing. So, yeah, being able to just have it in there. Yeah, and I don't know. It's not that I don't necessarily mistrust the password managers, but like you said, having to change them in multiple places is a bummer. So that'll be really nice.
Yeah, especially with iCloud Keychain getting shared password support. Like Spencer and I can have a
Yep.
shared little group
Ooh,
with
yeah.
the Riverside credentials and this or that for code completion. Then we can just share those passwords and not be too bothered by it. And then combined with the fact that Safari is finally getting like different sessions, mainly you can have like a work session and a personal session. Like
Hmm.
Spencer can go ahead and set up the stream in a Safari window without signing in and out of Google 17 times to go ahead and do that. So all around A pluses that I'm definitely looking forward to this, and this might be the thing that like pushes me onto the betas earlier than later. And
Mm.
then I'm gonna be like, Lynn, you should get the betas too, so we can share passwords. Extended family, you should get the beta too, so we can share a freaking Netflix password, which we might
Mm,
not be able to do anymore. Um, so
that's true.
that will be interesting. But yeah, overall, lots of A pluses from me for this. Greatly looking forward to it.
Yeah. Another A plus here is in malicious compliance class. Um, and someone called Niflas on Mastodon has this just fantastic idea for app permissions. So um, I'll just kind of read it for verbatim here. It says, when an app asks for permissions, the OS should not only let you answer yes or no, but every category should have yes, but feed the app fake data option. So, want my contacts for no reason? Have these generated fake ones. Want to listen to my microphone? Here's random ambiance sounds. Location, put me on a tiny 5 by 5 meter island. Uh, hell yeah, put it all in your database. Actively punishing services wins over boycotts any day. Didn't want that junk in the database? Don't ask for it. Which is like, that's such a good idea.
Hmm.
I could totally see Apple doing this in some way.
Yeah, like maybe it's not a main option, but if you know what you're doing and you know the option exists, you can go into settings and enable it. Uh,
Mhm.
maybe it's a developer option. It's like, oh, this is just for testing. I need some test data,
Yeah,
and you flick the switch, and then anytime you get a prompt, you have three options. That would be amazing.
yeah,
Because for the people who care, this is perfect. Like you can evaluate apps, you can do security research, you can do all sorts of things without giving apps access to everything and without being extra rich and having a separate device with a separate account and all that.
yeah,
Like there are real reasons that this is like quite useful. But then there are also the like malicious compliance reasons, which is just like the cherry on top of the cake. Um, because then why not? Yeah, you can have my contacts. Here you go. Why does everyone know John Appleseed?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's a default contact in their contacts. It used to be, didn't it? When you like
uh,
open contacts for the first time, it had like a few dummy ones just so that way you can have something in there. And John
I know it
Appleseed was
did.
one of them.
I know it did on the simulators. I don't know about actual real devices.
I
Not
might
sure.
I might be getting that conflated over the past 30 years of using Macs, but uh, yeah. Separately from that, Apple has released, unreleased, and re-released a rapid security response. And this was an actual important one that was, I believe, actively exploited in WebKit.
No.
So it's like, yeah, like please install this. But then the moment you installed it, a lot of websites like Facebook and Instagram stopped working.
Oh
And that
no.
is like, I guess they patched that problem. But joking aside, it seems to be because the rapid security response added an A to the user agent. And that A
Oh.
broke all the parsing because I don't know if you've ever seen a user agent. They make you believe that you're still using Netscape from like
That's awesome, dude.
1999. Uh, like it's just Netscape, but no, it's actually Mozilla. But no, it's actually for, Internet Explorer. But no, it's actually Safari. Like that's what a user agent looks like. It's just complete bogus. And it seems like we got to the point where if you're trying to match Safari, that no longer works because of the stupid A. And as a result of that, a whole bunch of websites broke. So Apple has a support article telling you, hey, if this rapid security response caused you trouble, you can uninstall it, which is exactly what they're meant to
Awesome.
do, right? That's perfect.
Yep.
And if it's not causing you trouble, like keep it. But there's an updated one that will go ahead and not have that problem, and everything will be a little better. So I say it's the system working as designed, and that's super cool.
Yeah. As I think we've already talked about rapid security responses a little bit, but they're small and they like install in a couple minutes if that. They're very fast once you restart your phone and that's cool. Um they're rapid in both that sense but also in the release and testing of them. So like it kind of makes sense that, they haven't been testing iOS 17 since May for nothing and it's still not going to release for a few months, but this was probably like done in a very short amount of time, days probably, that they
Hmm.
figured out the exploit and released a patch. So there's always that risk, but it's good that they let you roll it back if there is an issue like they did have. So yeah,
Yeah,
system works.
as long as it doesn't break apart the system that lets you roll back, we're good, right?
Haha,
Uh,
yes.
which they'll probably put more scrutiny towards if it ever gets to that point. Like, hey, the rapid security response thing has an exploit. That one's going to be a little bit more of an update, but the reason why
Sure.
it's fast is it just installs and then restarts your device. And that restarting when it launches, it like sees it and registers it. So it's not like a painful, lengthy, oh, we need to bring your computer offline so that way we can change a bunch of files and then bring it back online.
Mm,
It's no, it's just putting something somewhere and then the next time you restart it activates. So I think this is how Android updates. This is definitely how the Nintendo Switch updates. I don't know if you've ever installed anything on
yes.
a Nintendo Switch. It puts
So
Apple to
fast.
shame, because not only
Yeah.
does the device boot in seconds, which turns out like Macs used to boot in seconds with SSDs until people stopped caring about where they're splattering files, and then it's no longer seconds. But it used to be fast and then got slow. Nintendo Switch has always been blazing fast, and then you have an update, and you're like, I don't want to do an update. Do the update. It
It's
one
like 15 seconds at most.
Yeah, to watch the download happen, which you don't have to do. It can do it in the background, and then when there's an update, like you just restart and you have the update, and
Yeah, it's
it's
crazy.
there. It's no different than restarting the device in other ways. So, Apple, maybe consider that if you have copious amounts of disk space. Just install it on another read-only partition that nothing
Yeah.
can access except the main read-only partition, and then just swap and delete the old one. And if you can't do that, then fall back to this current strategy that takes forever. Fine, like that's fine by me. But Yeah, we
Yeah.
can do better. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about uh, how files get written to disk for some reason. I don't know. It might be writing a database or something.
Yeah.
And like it definitely concerns me that we got to a point where if you happen to boot a Mac from a spinning disk nowadays, it's horrendously slow, horrendously. It has nothing to
Yeah.
do with CPU bound. It's just people stopped paying attention of how they are writing stuff to disk. And if you have a bunch of synchronous access to disk that uh, like you're just waiting on, then everything is slowed down by that. And we were vastly more efficient when we were cognizant of that, right? When you had to use a slow device, then you realize what you're doing. And I worry every time like we have faster and faster devices now that our iPhones are essentially faster than most computers, like no one's going to care about
Yeah.
like performance optimization, and at the end of the day that's going to end up hurting battery life. Imagine how long battery life would be if everything was coded in the way that it was in the iPhone OS 2 days, right?
Right.
We would probably have 2-day battery life just because everything would be so uber efficient running on this blazing fast processor that just spends most of its time not doing anything. And that would be like super efficient and resourceful. When meanwhile, we're just not being as careful as we can be, and we're living the consequences of that. I'm not saying that I am the de facto standard of like how to code efficiently. I'm sure I'm making plenty of mistakes myself, but it is something as a developer to think about while you're developing things. Like people, I think this word has harmed the industry more than ever. It's like don't do performance
Pre-op.
optimiz.
Yeah.
What is it called?
Let's
Preemptive optimization or something.
premature optimization is the root of all evil, I think is how
Yeah,
it
I
goes.
think that is like the worst thing that we have done to ourselves is tell ourselves that if it's obvious that you can simplify something ahead of time and it's a tiny bit more complicated but it's a way more efficient, do it. It's always going to be worth it because you are not polluting the future space of performance optimizations as a result of that. Sure, it might like take you a little bit more time, and sure that saying is probably was probably put in place before people were actually measuring and like making good decisions. Like sometimes you can prematurely use a lazy and it ends up shooting yourself in the foot. Like I get it, but at the end of the day, if you know something is going to be bad performance wise and you uh, like willfully ignore it just because it's not necessary yet, I
Mm.
think that leads to worse products. Case in point, try to run a Mac off a spinning disk and then be woefully surprised that the inefficiencies abound. And if you're wondering, well, that's not so important because we have SSDs nowadays. Well, guess what? Apple sometimes sells fast SSDs and sometimes they sell half as fast SSDs,
Yeah.
and that really hurts themselves, right? This is Apple that we're talking about. This is not even third party developers for the most part. So yeah, just
Yeah. And kind of going along with that, I've kind of noticed that when when I had my brand new Mac, brand new 10-year-old Mac Mini saga a couple of weeks ago, one of them was running like Yosemite. It booted up really fast. I installed Ventura. It was really slow, both to boot and also just running in general. So
mhm.
there's definitely been like a change even in that short amount of time with
Yeah, because now we
same
expect.
hardware, same SSD,
Mhm.
right? But like way different, yeah.
Yeah, now we
Because those are running
expect
on Intel.
two cores to just always be available to run stuff in the background, and that's just not the case, right?
Yeah.
An over provisioned system like this iMac Pro that I'm using may work fine for a number of years because it has 16 cores or whatever. I think it's a 10 core. I don't remember. Let's look it up. It has 10 cores, 16 gigabytes of graphics memory, 64 gigabytes of
Yeah.
like system memory, 4 terabytes of SSD. Like this one will probably work fine. The Mac Mini that released at the same time in 2017,
No, dude.
not at all. Not mostly because they didn't update it until 2018, but that's besides the point. Um, so yeah, I think it's worth considering and worth working on, making sure that your apps, no matter what they're doing things efficiently, because you never know when there's going to be a weird regression that it's all going to come and bite you.
Mhm.
And yeah, finally, on our list of topics, we have Apple reorganizing their process for the Vision Pro, and it seems like this is the first departure, or one of the first departures that Apple has taken towards their organizational structure. Of instead of having individual teams work on individual uh, like product areas. Like there's no iPhone team and there's no macOS team. There's a
Right.
software team that works on both of those. It seems like Apple is actually evolving that to have a team dedicated to the Vision Pro, to solve those problems and be a little less cross functional. And I will only know time if this works out for them or not, or if it causes mass mayhem as Apple forgets that iOS is a thing, and we repeat the whole problem of macOS being neglected for years, or if that solves the problem. Who knows? But it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. The article mentions like the Apple's, car division is very separate and it's kind of been doing this separate team paradigm for a while. But that's like very different whereas the Vision Pro it's like it runs iPad apps, so it's pretty similar to the teams that already exist. So it's kind of in this weird middle ground where it's like it's separate but it's like basically the same thing and is using the same processors aside from that R1 chip or whatever. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yep. The last point that Mark Gurman shared with this memo of reorganization is that new Macs in October. Who'd have thunk? So I expect
Yeah,
new Macs in October.
cool.
Um, cool. Yay. This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Solark. Solark is a weather app designed to revolutionize how you and your loved ones stay informed about weather conditions and track sunrise and sunset times across multiple locations. With Solark, you can easily monitor conditions where your friends and family are, ensuring that everyone is prepared for whatever the elements may bring. My favorite feature is actually the Solar Arc itself, which makes it super easy to see which one of my co-hosts is up, and which one of them are sleeping at a quick glance, since you can rename any of the locations directly in the app. We want to thank Solarc for sponsoring our show. Search for Solarc, that's SOLARC, on the iOS App Store today to give it a try. So, Spencer, I've got a code completion tip for you.
Okay.
Have you ever been working with constraints and then the console says, hey, this constraint, it's problematic, it's giving us trouble, and then you're
No,
wondering, that never happened to
I've
you?
never had that. No, no, I'm perfect at
Oh,
constraints.
you're perfect at
Easy.
constraints. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm talking
But
to
you can I'll let you still tell it for everyone
oh,
else.
for hypothetical reasons, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. If you ever run into this in the future, well, you have some problematic constraints, and they get barfed all over your console. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's 2 dozen. Cases may vary. Um, and you're like, what on earth is this constraint? I don't know what 0x2b ad 1 DEA is. That's a bad idea. And like you don't know what constraint that is, so you go ahead and copy that, and you Google it, and that doesn't help you. So you could
Yeah.
do something different instead. And this one was surfaced from the good old repository of xcode.tips, which is a treasure trove of these sorts of tips. You can just double click that address, click on view debugging. This will pause everything, let you paste that address in the view debugger like search field at the very bottom,
Mhm.
and then that will highlight the constraint in your UI. So then you can know why this constraint is problematic, because the view debugger will also tell you it's problematic, and it will give you like the alternatives. So that is like an A plus tier tip for working with constraints if you're still working with constraints. A very very cool. Never thought to try that, so Chef's
Yeah,
kiss.
that's really cool. In all honesty, yes, that happens all the time. And on LumaFusion, I mean, the app's old, so it uses, uh, it uses auto layout for almost everything. So has so many constraints, and yeah, it can definitely you put one constraint in it, it breaks like literally like 20 things, and you're like, oh, awesome. So yeah, that's cool. I will actually use it.
Awesome. So this week on Completion Curiosities, we have two very cool links. The first one, Spencer, you shared this with us. It's the Game of Life built in the Game of Life. So if you don't know what Conway's The Game of
Yeah.
Life is, it's like a pixel simulation where each pixel is a cell, and cells survive if they have like two or three neighbors, but die if they have less or more. And are spawned in if there are like three cells surrounding a blank one. So it just kind of, once you click run, it just kind of creates these beautiful patterns of these cells like growing and shrinking. And sometimes you kill the population with a certain starting configuration. Sometimes it just runs forever.
Yeah.
And this person on YouTube wondered, is this Turing complete? And it turns out, yes, it is Turing complete. And you can write software using the Game of Life, because you can go ahead and build gates, because there are certain configurations that like move a signal, and then you can use that signal to trigger other signals, and so on and so forth. And not only did they build a like a computer that runs the Game of Life, they built a display that shows the Game of Life being run on the Game of Life.
Yeah, dude,
um,
it's so
and
cool.
there's one moment in the video where like they're just talking about this, and it's zooming out, and you kind of like get to see all the processing nodes talking to each other, and then you realize this isn't a processing node, this is the display of the Game of Life being simulated in real time, or not in real time, like super fast forward. I'm sure it's
Sure,
probably
yeah.
like hell on a computer to
Super
simulate.
slow. Yeah.
um but super cool watching that moment when it just zooms out, and then you realize, oh, this is the exact same pattern that I was just watching just a moment ago. So very cool. Definitely recommend watching this one if you're interested in how computers and turn completeness work. um, great piece of video time there.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. I was blown away. I think I don't know how it worked, but I think some students at Lambda School, like even in the iOS program, one of their challenges was to build the Game of Life. I was always so jealous, and I'm like very tempted to build an iOS app that does the Game of Life. I'm sure there are some, but I've never done it. So yeah, it's but seriously, watch the video. It was just like so cool. And our I think we've talked about this maybe in an after show. The checking if Tears of the Kingdom is Turing complete, this just like takes it to another level because there's no limit, and you can just build these ginormous things, and it's very very cool.
Definitely. And then the second and last link I have for this week is a George Carlin anecdote. So if you don't know who George Carlin is, he is like a god tier comedian, I would say. Unfortunately, no longer around. But if you do look up his videos, definitely look up the classic of Why Earth Made Plastic. Um, that's one of the best ones that stays rent free in my brain. But this is an anecdote shared by a whole bunch of other comedians earlier in their career, and I'll just read this verbatim because I think this is so nice to think about for the most part, and I'll talk about that why afterwards. So Rick Moranis is talking, and he says, "I was a big George Carlin fan. How could I not be? But there came a point where I saw him on a talk show and he was reading off cards. I had a feeling I could look like him, so I did an impression of him reading off notes and telling lazy jokes. Years went by and I was at an awards show. Across the aisle was Carlin sitting there. We looked at each other and he just said, 'Brutal, man. Brutal, brutal.' I sort of shrugged and gestured about how much I love him, but I never really met him. Years later, after he passed away, I spoke with his daughter, Kelly Carlin. She wanted to use the SCTV clips in a show she was putting together. I told her, 'Look, I want you to understand that, believe it or not, it was really done out of reverence. She said, "No, you don't understand. It had a profound effect on him. He wasn't aware that he was really being lazy. He was unhappy and wasn't doing the kind of work that he wanted to be doing. And your impression caused him to change his approach. God, I am glad I spoke to her." So, if you want to take anything from that, it's not to make impressions of people to kind of force them to do the right thing. I mean, you can to billionaires. Anyone can make impressions of billionaires. They might like terminate you with the vast amount of money they have, but that's on them, not on you. But the real lesson here is that if someone criticizes your work, you can do one of two things. You can be mad about it, or you can think about why they're criticizing you. And that might actually help you like find more joy in doing the work that you're doing, right? And that's the real lesson that I wanted to share with this that kind of touched me. And maybe in many months I'll talk about it more, but like it's pushing me to change in a different way than I thought. And frankly, I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I for whatever reason the word escapes me, but like when you have negative or positive feed, it's not feedback, criticism,
Hmm.
right? It's like it's he was essentially criticizing him, but I mean he meant it as positive criticism, and that's the way that George Carlin eventually took it. But that could easily be seen as like negative criticism. So, like you said, it's just all about perspective. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I would say like always be careful criticizing people via impersonations, because in the large majority of scenarios it's not going to go your way, right?
It
You are
definitely,
going to be insulting them. And like it was clear that Rick Moranis felt that he had insulted, and like later in his career he's like, oh
that's
shoot,
true.
younger me was such an asshole about this. And he clearly thought nonstop about that to the point where once it finally did come up, like that's immediately the first thing he's thinking about. So it's one thing to do it with your close friends and family who you know well and who know like their own shortcomings, and like you were just poking fun at them because they know
Yeah,
their own shortcomings. Like that's one thing, but to do it to a stranger, even if you look up to them, like keep it in mind as you use like Mastodon or Twitter or Threads or any of these things. Like the people you're following, they're not your friends, they're not necessarily people you know well, they don't know you. So if you want to joke with them or uh like make some pleasantries because you want to start a conversation, just keep in mind that they don't know you, and anything you say can just be very bizarre when it comes across from a stranger. So that's like the second thing that you can learn from this. And in this case it worked out fine, but in the large majority of cases it probably won't work out fine. And you might upset or push the person you were trying to like step put a one step closer to further away from you by
hmm,
doing that. So always keep that in
yeah,
mind with any interaction you have on the internet. It's something so easily forgotten because we think like, oh, hey, I know this person so much because I follow them. They know nothing about me though.
yeah,
And that goes in every direction. You might be so comfortable with someone, and then someone talks to you, and you're like, who are you? So
yeah.
interesting
Uh,
nonetheless.
it reminds me of like our very early days of our code completion Slack group, because at least for me, I was like very careful about what I said, and when I made a joke, I like purposely made it very clear that something was a joke, because we were all coworkers, but like I didn't really know anyone super well,
Hmm.
and now we just like kind of, I mean, not that we do it all the time, but like we can definitely make a joke and everyone in the Slack group will know it's like not antagonistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But we've been doing this for years at this point, and I think we're pretty dang good friends, all of us. So I feel comfortable doing that and not having them take offense, if that makes sense.
Said another way, Spencer is 100% in his right to make fun of me for having a million windows open. Not
Exactly.
necessarily saying that anyone else should make a joke about that. Like,
Yeah.
it might be funny. I might laugh, or I might take deep offense to it because you don't necessarily understand all the nuance that I'm hiding out by trying to like present it as something silly on the show.
Yeah.
So do keep that in mind. Um, not.
Parasocial relationships are weird, man.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's what that's what it is when you just follow someone with a ton of followers. It's like you know them, but they don't know you. So,
Yeah, it's a weird world we live in. That's for sure.
indeed.
As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on mastodon.social at code completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to toot at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtas for joining me this week. My name once again is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DIMITRIBOUNIOL. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
So I don't know if this is enough for a commented out, but I am almost at zero point 0.1 and it's feeling so good getting it
Nice.
finally over the freaking finish line. I feel as I head into working full time again, that progress is going to slow tremendously.
Right.
Because I've personally been working on this basically only in the evenings, because I had a very unhealthy sleep schedule of waking up like hours before I would need to take care of niece for the day,
Oh.
and therefore spent all my time doing errands and stuff like that. And then Lynn hands niece over to me, and then whether I get work or not, that's completely dependent on whether niece is happy or not.
Yes.
This is the new boss in the room is like saying, nope, now's not the time to work. So we'll see if I get it to that point, but like it's ever so close. I have just two things left, and I think I'm inching towards them. I had a bunch of time to work on it yesterday, and I did not work on it yesterday, and I feel bad about that. So shame on me. Uh,
No.
but need to do some cleanup stuff with snapshots, and that will enable an unlimited undo history, which for apps I
Oh,
think
that's
is like
so cool.
so tantalizing. Another thing I realized it could do is say your app is a record of contacts, right? You could look at a contact and then enter a time machine like mode and see the history of that one
Their old
record.
phone number.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, over time.
That's
And none of
cool.
that is like necessarily lost. So that's an alternative way of thinking about how this like persistent history could work. And I am I am ever so looking forward to that working. That said, it's like a whole bunch of setups to make sure that it works properly and
Sure.
tracks history properly. So that's one part of it, and the second part of it is your favorite migrations. Um,
Yeah.
so I have migrations half working, whereas if you save an old like version of a struct, as long as you keep that struct around in your code base, you can always reload it and then migrate to the new version
Cool.
lazily. And this is all taken care of for you. You just specify, hey, for this version, use like decode
Mhm.
this, and for this version, decode this. So that's all neat and good. But another part of Codable Data Store is being able to just change the indexes on a whim. Because say like the nature of your app changes and you need an index for this, and you need it to be able to rebuild the indexes. So
Mm.
you want an opportunity to be able to warm it up before you start like your users doing anything. And you can show a UI for that and a progress bar and all that. So I need to work on the part that gives you progress and does the migration of indexes. So that's the second big thing. And I think after that point, I can call this a zero point 0.1,
Nice.
which means that I will likely start using it in an app that I'm building, which I won't talk about. But that will be a very cool point because that means I can now start to realize where other shortcomings were, and I
Yeah,
immediately started to think of some like compounded indexes where sometimes you want to index two things. So that's something that uh, I will need to solve, but I can solve that in the zero point 0.1 days because technically it's possible to do it. You just need to like make a custom type and all that. I just want
sure.
to simplify it. So um, yeah, almost there.
That's exciting. So, would you say that like at that point, like you said you're going to use it, but like would you say it's like good enough to like start alpha or beta testing for like other people like me specifically?
Yeah, I would say alpha testing is open season. Still
Cool.
expect to lose all your data, right?
Oh
I'm
yeah.
making
Yeah.
no guarantees at this point that the store won't change under the hood. I
Yep.
will make those guarantees once it's at a certain point in the beta of
Yeah.
where I feel comfortable releasing it to the releasing an app built with this. That's probably the point where it will like reach this point. At that point, like it will migrate itself, right? If I need
Sure.
to change some internal structure that's saved to disk, it will go ahead and work with both. Like the all the file types are versioned for that
Hmm.
purpose.
Right.
But until then, like anything and everything can change, and I don't want to have a bunch of legacy code and like supporting this alpha version that no
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
uses except
Yep.
one person. So it's still in that alpha state, but it's progressed to a point where it is 100% usable. It will 100% use up all your RAM if you insert 100 million things in it.
Yeah.
Um, I have a unit test that inserts like 50 or 100,000 things, and that uses 3 gigabytes of RAM because it keeps the historical records of everything up in,
Right.
with every change in memory, which it shouldn't do that. I know it shouldn't do that. I didn't get around to cleaning it up yet. Give me some slack. I have plans of how to do that. It's architected in a way that will allow that to happen, but
Well, yeah,
it
it's
needs to happen first. Probably will happen immediately after I get the migrations work because that will like surface that to the front stage anytime you want to migrate your 10,000
mm,
entries. But 3 gigabytes. I don't want that to be the case. So
yeah.
getting there little by little.
Yeah, but it's not like you're saying like, "Boom, I'm almost ready for version 1, baby,"
Oh
and
no, I'm at
releasing that. So,
0.1. This is like
you're aware of that.
the first of betas. So
Yeah, you're aware of that,
um
and that's like totally fine. So,
yeah, let me look up. I love that I can just type the name of this thing and it's the only thing that exists on Google. It's
yeah, that's pretty cool.
very convenient. Okay, so let me look up the README because oh, interesting. Oh, okay. Let me look up the README because I have three things left in my 0.0.x days, and that's updating snapshots that have multiple manifests that will allow in the future to tell a snapshot, hey, roll back or roll forward, and then
Mhm.
you can have full history. The second one is flushing out historical edit metadata. This is so that way when you decide to eventually delete the historical stuff that's taking up too much space, it knows how to delete the pages that are not being used. So
Oh, cool.
it's important loosely to not have terabytes of disk used for
Yeah.
historical stuff. And then the final one is migrating entries. So that's what is left on my plate before I call this usable. And me calling it usable means I get to play with my new SSD NAS setup, which I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
putting together. So I am highly motivated to get this part done.
Yes.
And then afterwards, on the road to 1.0, these would be the things where I would say this is 100% stable. Please go ahead and use it. This is better than core data. It's the coolest thing since sliced bread and since threads, apparently. Um, and that list is significantly longer. I have composite indexes via macros, maybe. I need to include macros for index paths because that's kind of clunky at the moment. Because
Mm,
turns out key paths you don't have a string like definition of those, and I need that to store on disk for the indexes. So that's kind of important. I need to clean up old resources in memory again, so you don't use 3 gigabytes every
sure.
time you save too much. I need to clean up old resources on disk. Um, not everyone needs infinite history, so that should
Yeah.
fix that. Oh, I got one of these things done. Reversed range read. So if you read a range in reverse, it turns out I did that, so I can cross that off the list.
Oh,
Cool.
nice.
Good of me to read this list over. Controls for the edit history. So namely, probably some sort of like provided undo manager that you can just go ahead and set for your collection view.
Hmm.
And that means that if your users undo or redo, it will go through that undo manager directly. And when they launch your
Right.
app, if your app was launched and there's undo history, great. If your app wasn't launched and there's no undo history, it will still work. So you have that persistent undo stack.
Cool.
This will only really be usable for simpler apps, I would say, because as soon
Yeah.
as you have more than one thing in a persistence that is saved all at once, like you don't want to undo sync data, right? Like there's some stuff that it just becomes a little iffy with
Yeah.
this kind of setup. So there will be certain points where you can say like, hey, undo history is kind of like out after
Cleared
this
out.
point.
Hmm.
And the data might be there historically, but the undo history is not very usable pre this point. Like you did a migration, can't really undo past the migration because you're going to need to
Hmm.
do that migration again. So uh, that's that's one thing to consider for undo history, but it's something I'm thinking about. Um, I want a helper type to use with SwiftUI slash observability slash combine, depending on which one
Mm,
you're using. That basically makes all this data available in the main actor. So you can basically say, hey, I'm
nice.
interested in books, just vend an array that I can connect to Swift UI. And anytime that array changes, it'll
Little
use,
update.
yeah, it'll use publisher to go ahead and update your UI so
Hmm.
that you can go ahead and say like, hey, I'm interested in this range currently, but also go ahead and filter this stuff. So it gives you some higher level
Oh,
control
cool.
that you can just plug into an app and not need to think too much about. Otherwise, it works kind of like a REST API. You ask for resource and it gives you the resource. You save a resource, it
Mm,
saves the resource.
right.
You delete the resource, it deletes the resource. But this gives you like a more modern view that just will asynchronously load. So you'll see stuff
Hmm.
trickle in,
Oh,
and
that's
as you
cool.
filter, it'll just filter stuff like that. So really looking forward to that. Um, I need to add comprehensive test coverage. I've been writing lazy
Mm,
tests, which run the code but don't verify anything, just so that way I can verify it
sure.
and make sure that it works, but not necessarily need to spend all my time writing tests. So that will come as I find bugs. I'll probably beef up the test coverage. It's also because Xcode 15 did not have test coverage enabled and I was too lazy. Xcode 15 beta 4 does have test coverage enabled, so I'm probably going to be backfilling those quite
Nice.
soon. I want a comprehensive usage guides of like how to go ahead and do the right thing with this. Can't release a 1.0 without that, especially as much as I yelled at Apple for releasing code with no documentation. I'm not going to follow in those footsteps, so I want to have a good usage guide and an example app, so that way you can go ahead and follow along
Nice.
to like build out a super simple. I think I'm going to
That's
go with
always.
like books and authors, like a two model
Mhm.
setup.
Yeah.
Just talk about all the different facets, migrations, changing your ID, like indexes, and you can walk through that process. So, uh, I want to make sure that there's a memory persistence. So currently, there's only a disk persistence that works. The memory persistence would be extra useful in SwiftUI previews or your own unit
Mm,
tests.
yeah.
So that way, you can go ahead and mock data that runs through the exact same code path that the rest of your app uses.
Hmm.
And it will work until the preview is done running, or it will work until the unit test is finished. And the example app should hopefully show you how to like architect your app in a way that makes this very easy to write tests for, because any persistence model that makes write tests hard means that you're not going to write tests for it. So this should hopefully help there. Um, and then finally, I want to make sure that there's a pre-configured data store for storing pure data. So it's not a codable data store, it's just a data store.
Right.
So that way you can store things like images in there. It should do quite a good job at making sure that's consistent with your main data store objects. So if you save an object and you save an image at the same time, you're sure that you have both of those. If you delete an object and you delete the image, you deleted both of those, kind of thing.
Right. Cool.
Um, and then after I do 1.0, that's when the other features come in, like snapshots and backups.
Hmm.
I want to write a companion app that can just inspect these data stores. And something I
Oh,
want to
nice.
do is in the data store itself that got persisted to disk, I want to have a URL to that exam companion app. So that way, if a user is looking at this and they want your app is defunct, right, and they want to just save their data, or like look at it again, instead of poking at it manually, which they totally can do, they can go ahead and just download this app, and then just open the data store
View
and inspect
everything.
it manually, make
That's
a
cool.
tweak, do whatever they need to do. I want to support other kinds of persistences, like maybe a distributed one for a multi-server deployment.
Hmm.
That would be totally possible. I want to support compression and encryption on a per database data store basis. So some data may be public, some data may be like
That's cool.
crucial, and a user might need to enter a password to be able to see it. And I want to allow external writes to a shared inbox. So if you have an extension that cannot write to the data store at the same time that the app is running, that will cause mayhem. But it can schedule writes to happen in an inbox, and then once the main app runs, it can go ahead and consume those items and apply them to the main data store. So lots of things I want to do with this, that will happen with time. So like it's never complete software, this thing, but hopefully once
Yes,
I get to a
indeed.
certain point, it will likely be stable enough where I'm just going to be improving it rather than adding functionality. So
Sure.
those improvements will likely come when a new version of Swift comes out, and Codable is slightly different or improved, or there's a better version. That's when I'll be like fixing it up, but I don't necessarily want to be adding features ad infinitum long term.
Sure.
So that's basically what I have on my mind. Oh, I want to add full text search too. That will probably happen after
Oh,
1.0.
yeah. That'll
But
be
it's not
nice.
on the list, so maybe I'll forget about it. Who knows? Kind of useful though. We'll see.
Yes. Yeah, querying is nice. Cool. That's super exciting. I did want to ask, and you've most definitely thought of this, I'm sure, but are you gonna like be able to let the developer limit like how many historical versions there are, type of thing, or like how
Yeah,
big the undo manager can be?
yeah, so it needs, if you want to support, if you just have an app and no extension or anything, it can be one, right? Like you can have no undo support
Okay,
other than like doing undo yourself. Like, hey, you undid a
sure.
thing, reapply that to the database. It's not like a fast particular thing. Like it's not just moving a pointer along a
Hmm.
historical point. It's just adding a more new
Yeah.
entries. That's totally doable, and would work fine. If you have an extension and you want that extension to be able to read the data store while the app is writing to it, you need to have some amount of uh, like existing edits, so that way the extension can point to the wrong one while your app is like adding new ones and not delete
Mm,
the old one yet. Like it needs to be able to access it fast enough. So you'll probably want to have like 10 in that scenario, where there's always a valid snapshot in its entirety where an extension can go ahead and read data, and then it can go ahead and move to a newer snapshot in the next iteration, but it needs to stay on disk
gotcha.
long enough for that whole process to finish. So 10 is what I'm thinking seems reasonable.
I don't
Um,
know.
yeah, I didn't get to that point yet. It's just
Yeah.
hypothetical still. So that's two options. And then the third is it will be kind of unlimited from the beginning of time. And then you can choose to clear it out anytime you do something big, like a migration,
Oh,
for
okay.
instance. Um,
Cool.
and then separately to these iterations of a snapshot, you can make a complete snapshot if you want. So right before migration, you want to like double check things. You want to be able to roll
Yeah.
back if you need to. You can make a brand new snapshot in its entirety. It'll just duplicate everything on disk.
Right.
Good safeguards. You can allow the user to make backups, and those backups will be kept indefinitely. The user can manage them via your UI, like you just present
Hmm.
it in a UI kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's like three stages of persistence, historical persistence that can happen. And they're all basically the same thing, but they all have slightly different semantics. So
Right.
depends on what you want to do. Like right before you clear all persistence, you can make a snapshot, and you can keep that snapshot around for 30 days in case the user wants to be like, this wasn't for me.
Right.
But
Yeah.
going
Yeah. Yeah.
back to a different snapshot means they lose all new stuff. So there's like downsides for everything.
Hmm.
But
Well, I think giving them, the developer, or and by extension the user, options of like different ways to do it. That's super nice.
yeah, my goal
Mm.
is at any point in time, you, the developer, can access one of these older iterations in its entirety. So you can have a complete read only view of the past. And you can
Hmm.
load all sorts of objects that you need, no matter how complex your data store setup is. So if you have 17 different object types all interacting in complex ways, like you have access to that entire thing. Kind of like in Git, if you go back to an old commit, your whole repo is exactly as it was
Right.
when you did that. So hopefully it makes that easy. And if you ever need to inspect stuff on disk, like everything is named in a sane way. It's like dated up to the millisecond. I needed to add
Yeah.
milliseconds because I was adding hundreds of
Oh,
thousands of entries, and they were all within a second. I'm like, shoot, Finder does
this is not
not
helpful.
sort. Finder does not sort hexadecimal values properly.
Oh,
It will find like, oh hey, this one is a number and a letter, so it's smaller than number letter, which is smaller than number letter, and so
right.
forth, because it's trying
Yeah.
to be smart about how to do
Hmm.
stuff for normal people. Hexadecimal stuff does not work great in that scenario, so I needed to
That makes
add
sense.
milliseconds, but that makes it super easy to see like what the most recent thing is. You can just open it in Xcode and see, oh hey, this got saved properly before this. Like, oh shoot, I don't remember, I can't find this record. You can go ahead and look and do Command F and search for it.
Right. Yeah.
So
That'll be
it's
nice.
it's very developer friendly. You don't need other tools. The companion app might be very useful when it does come out to be able to inspect your own stuff, but hopefully you can use this for library type apps where you have just a bunch of stuff for the app in general. It might work for document based apps, like your document can be this. It will work great on iCloud Drive because everything is a copy. So that means that nothing will really ever get out of sync on
Mm,
iCloud Drive. So hopefully designed well for the future use cases, at least for the next 10 years. Then we can rewrite it from scratch to do something else
yeah.
and not care at that point.
Yeah. For sure. When you have another child.
Yeah, that'll be when not codable data store, serializable data store comes
Hey.
out. Running on Swift 6.17 because it will still be on Swift 6 by then, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um,
That's probably fair. We've been on 5 for a while.
yeah. Has it been 10
Cool.
years of
Exciting
Swift yet?
updates.
I think it had. Almost,
Yes, I
right?
think so. I think so.
2014 is when Swift came out. I don't think
Was it
anyone
2014? Oh,
celebrated it, so it's probably
yeah,
like in a year.
June 2014. Yeah, so we've got just under a year.
Crazy.
Yeah,
The age creeps up on you.
that is true.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.